Well, well, well. Hurghada, Luxor, Aswan, Abu Simbel, Cairo, Alexandria, and now, as we tick over to our 2000th mile completed, we arrive in our 7th and final destination of this trip. This, ladies and gents, is the wonderful Sharm el-Sheikh. It is a very Hurghada-y destination, very touristy, not an awful lot of old stuff to be looking at or talking about. Beach huts, yacht, pop music, sun lounges. This is so not my normal kind of holiday destination, but you've got to admit it is pretty lovely, isn't it? And well, if you were around for that Hurghada video, the first one of this whole series that we started filming 7 days ago, 2,000 miles ago, a lot's happened since then you'll remember that I said we were going to 8 places and not 7, and that's something I'm going to talk about in a little bit. I've got to say, after a whole week of experiencing all different kinds of chaos, a million hours on transport, visiting all of Egypt's highlights in a very compact, efficient, high momentum trip, it does feel, as unusual as it feels, it does feel rather nice to settle at a place that just slows it all down a little bit right at the end before going home. This is absolutely not a destination that you come to cover loads of miles on foot and go and see some old interesting stuff. This is a place where you lay down on a beach, relax, lower the heart rate from normal everyday life and just chill out, maybe go snorkeling, get on a boat, etc. But owing to my itchy-footed nature, I'm still going to go for a mooch, have a look around at what there is to offer while we reflect on the past week, do a bit of counting up, a bit of tallying, and generally just wrap up what has been a properly mint week-long adventure around Egypt. You know how I literally just said there is nothing to look at or talk about in Sharm el-Sheikh? Well, I've just stumbled across this castle. I mean, it's closed, so we can't go in it. I've got no information whatsoever about what it actually is or was, but it's a pretty cool start to the day. It's a very quiet place to walk around Sharm el-Sheikh, partly because there is nothing really to be walking about to, and because of that everyone is confined to their resorts where there is stuff to do. There's a lot of private resorts, a lot of private beaches. This is where people do all the water sports and everything, but in terms of actually walking between places, there is really not an awful lot going on. We do have some deserty mountains to look at in the distance, got that castle we just found, but apart from that, not a lot happening. We'll go for a leisurely mooch into the town a little bit later on, but for now I'm going to go and do something that is probably the strangest thing to me out of all the things we've done over the past 2,000 miles of absolute chaos. I'm going to go and try and lay down on a beach. Apparently that's what people do around these parts.
Jacob? I'm going to cry in the corner there.
How do you oh. Is it this? Nope, not comfy. No, we can't do it, chaps. I don't really know at what point you start rushing about in loads of mania or you start spouting random facts about when a cathedral was built. It's not for me, this. It does look awfully nice though. Yeah, just not built for that. I wish I was, but I think the pace is still there from the past 6 days. So let's go have a look at the town. So while we mooch into the town, there's a few points of discussion we've got to tackle. So first I'm going to talk about the costs. I said in the first video right at the beginning that I want to do this extremely cheaply for a few £100. I've had a few people ask me a bit more about whether that was done or not, so I'm going to talk about that. And then I'm going to mention some of my highlights of the trip. If you've seen these videos and thought, I want to go to a couple of these places, give you a quick summary of where I think is most worth going to. And then we'll talk about why this is in fact a 7-day trip and not an 8-day trip, but we'll get there. So firstly, the big one, the cost. Now I'm not going to do this too forensically because it will take us forever, but I'm going to give you a list of all the transports I took and I'm going to overlay that with some nice clips so it's a bit less boring. But basically, we started with a flight from Stansted to Milan to Hurghada. Then we got the bus from Hurghada to Luxor. Then we got a hot air balloon in Luxor. Then we got a train from Luxor to Aswan. Then we went from Aswan to Abu Simbel, back to Aswan on a minibus, Then we flew from Aswan to Cairo domestically. We got the bus from Cairo to Alexandria. Then we got an overnight bus from Alexandria to Sharm el-Sheikh. Then I'm going back to the airport tomorrow. I'm going to fly home back to Stansted. And then if we include all the taxis and scooters and all the cool stuff we got about all the cities, and we include the visa for getting to Egypt in the first place, total number 201 quid. Not bad at all. Oh, and we cannot forget the camel we took in Cairo. That is included in that 201 quid figure. And just a little side stat, spent 48 hours on transport this week. So, you know, it's not for everybody, but it all worked out. The plan turned out a treat. We've made it to pretty much anything we could possibly want to see in Egypt. And I think it's all gone pretty well. And with that, we've made it into the quite pleasant and incredibly quiet town in Sharm el-Sheikh. The accommodation story, you'll be glad to know, is a much simpler one. 6 nights, average just over 12 quid a night, so a total of 74 quid. Another cost to factor in when visiting Egypt is that every single thing you want to see, like Luxor Temple or Abu Simbel or the pyramids or anything, they all cost an admission fee. On average, they're 5 or a tenner English money to get into each. Some are more, some are less, whatever. But in total, I've worked out that I've spent 62 quid on everything that we've visited on this trip. And so I believe that brings our total, as long as my brain hasn't completely turned to mush on this trip, to 337 quid, which I reckon is at least 10 times, maybe 15 times less than you would pay if someone else organised it for you. This place does seem, although maybe not specifically my kind of thing, it does seem quite lovely here. Sharm el-Sheikh is actually like one really, really long bit of city. It's not just this bit, this is one part of many. This is near a place called Shark's Bay. There's about a million different bays, a million different kind of little town areas, but this one that I'm in, it's not bad at all. The only thing we've missed out on this trip from the original plan was the overnight bus to climb a mountain to get there for sunrise. That is due to, well, I don't really know if it's food poisoning or what, but I've been dying a little bit, hence why I'm taking today slowly and decided to cancel that trip last night. But to be totally honest, I expected to not even get to day 2 without a massive hiccup. The plan was ambitious, and so getting all the way to Sharm el-Sheikh without a problem, I think that's gone pretty well. I don't mind missing the last thing because we've had a pretty good time for the rest of the trip. This is actually such a good place to end a trip like this. It might seem a little bit anticlimactic after all the rushing around and old cool stuff that we've seen, but I think it's just a really good chance to, you know, just breathe out a second before getting on the plane back home. I'm quite glad I've ended up here. I only came here to get the plane back, so it's a cheap place to get the flight, but yeah, it's not a bad stop at all before going home. I think Hurghada was a very similar vibe, and I think that was a brilliant place to start the trip because it's my first time away on my own in a long time to somewhere brand new, 2 years, like I said in the first video. It was a good warm-up to get ready for the madness that ensued. As we got towards the end of the day, we started seeing, you know, more hustle and bustle and that kind of thing, got us ready for the days ahead. I think Luxor was absolutely exceptional. I didn't know an awful lot about what to expect, well, from any of these places really, because I only planned this trip a few days in advance, and in that time I had work because I'm a normal old man nowadays. But Luxor was our first taste of ancient Egypt, and I think the temples there and even just the general surroundings are just stunning. Absolutely loved Luxor. Now, Aswan's a bit of a funny one because it's only really a place that most people, myself included, use as a bit of a transit stop while going between other cities and to Abu Simbel to shorten the journey a little bit. But I think Aswan might be my favourite destination of the whole trip, actually. There was nothing particularly of note there that really stood out, but I just really loved my time in Aswan. There was enough stuff to see, but there was a relaxed side to it all. There was enough old stuff to make it interesting with the obelisk and the quarry, etc. And overall, yeah, just absolutely brilliant. If you are thinking of going from somewhere like Luxor to Abu Simbel and you're going via Aswan just to stay over and get a bus, spend a bit of time there. It's mint. Abu Simbel was, well, Abu Simbel, an absolutely incredible feat of human engineering, both in ancient history and recently. One thing I didn't talk enough about in those videos was just how ridiculously enormous the challenge really was to move those temples. They cut it into thousands of pieces and had to put it back exactly the way the original one was built, which means it had to face the sun in the exact direction, everything had to line up perfectly. The margin for error, by the way, in the placement of those very precisely cut blocks that weigh tons and tons each, and thousands of them, was 5 millimeters. That's how precisely it had to go back together. Like I said, it's something I barely touched on in that video, and I should have spoken about it more because it's almost as incredible as the original build itself. So yeah, just a marvellous place, marvellous to be able to see what it is we're really capable of. Cairo was ridiculous, absolutely the fastest pace out of anywhere we've been in Egypt this whole trip, as to be expected with such a busy city. But I'm glad we managed to find some highlights. For example, the church inside the cave was just sensational. I'm glad we had those bits to take us away from the hustle and bustle just a little bit. But as touristy as it is, seeing the pyramids in the flesh, it's just one of those things you've got to do if you're in Cairo. And I am quite glad that I didn't pass up on the chance to ride a camel. It's not something that I actually expected to do. In fact, it's something that I expected to avoid completely. But, you know, I think at some point we had to do something completely stereotypically English in Egypt, and that is ride a camel around the pyramids. I think that was a pretty good vibe, something that I didn't think I was going to be doing. And overall, yeah, Cairo was a blast, but a very, very busy one. Alexandria was like a small version of Cairo, but with the sea involved, which makes it nicer. It had some different stuff for us to look at, like it had that Roman amphitheatre, something that you're not going to find anywhere else in Egypt, so it's cool to see things like that. And I can't say it was less chaotic than Cairo. It was as chaotic, it was just smaller, so it was a bit more concentrated, but it did have a different vibe in general. It had a lot more recent history stuff to show, like a lot of the Roman things, as well as the citadel. The citadel was a pretty good spot, and overall it just looked a little bit more European than the rest of Egypt. Had its tram system, the city centre looked a bit more like what we'd expect to see somewhere like, I don't know, Spain or Italy. So, you know, definitely a different experience, and it was a good vibe. And then after all that, we arrived here, Sharm el-Sheikh. The sun's going down, it's pleasant, we've seen it all today. But I think overall my favourite places of the whole trip have to either be Luxor, for obvious reasons. Luxor was spectacular, or Aswan. And but I don't know why. There's nothing in particular about Aswan that I think was incredible. It was just a pretty nice place. What a week. What a week, boys. I think after all that, I'm ready for a sit down for my first actual meal for a week, and I might even treat myself to a pint. Cheers for sticking around. It's been a long time since we've done this. I've had an absolute blast. I hope you've enjoyed seeing some of Egypt as well. If you've got any more questions about specifics or whatever, just drop a comment or message me on Instagram or Facebook or something. I'm sure you can find me. This has been such a vibe. I'm so grateful that I've had the chance to have one of these solo missions again, and I implore you all to do the same as I always did, or just to get on a plane at all. Life's better now. We're finally allowed to explore and have fun and do new things again, so I recommend making the most of it. But as for me, if there is going to be a next one, I'll see you there, chaps. Cheers, boys, in a bit.